Mr. President, some regard you as an international pariah, a dictator with blood on your hands. Give me an argument for why you are not, when in the past 7 years, hundreds of thousands of Syrians have been killed, arrested, imprisoned, and even tortured.
So the story that you're talking about, or let's say the Western narrative, that this is bad president, he's killing his own people, and the whole world is against him because he's international pariah, but he's been in his position for 7 years, while he's fighting everyone in this world. Can we convince your readers about this story? It doesn't even hold together. I mean, the different factor of this narrative, it doesn't, it's not logical, it's not realistic. So this president is in his position because he has support of his own people. So how could he have this support while he's killing the same people? So the story is not correct. We are fighting the terrorists, and those terrorists supported by the British government, the French government, and the American, and their puppets, whether in Europe or in our region. And we are fighting them, and we have public support in Syria to fight those terrorists. That's why we are advancing. We cannot make these advances just because we have Russian and Iranian support. They cannot substitute the popular support. And the proof of what I'm talking about, Shah of Iran, the Western puppets, he couldn't withstand the backlash of the public Iranians, and he collapsed, the whole system collapsed in a few weeks, and he had to flee his country. So
Aleppo is now seeing what is perhaps the most fierce fighting since the war started almost 6 years ago here in Syria. Yeah. But the Western politicians and Western media have been largely negative about your army's advance. Why do you think this is happening? Do they take it as their own defeat?
The defeat of the terrorists is the defeating of their proxies, to talk bluntly. These are their proxies, and for them the defeat of the terrorists is the defeat of the country that provide them, whether regional countries or Western countries like the United States, first of all the United States and France and UK.
So you think they take it as their own defeat, right?
Exactly, that's what I mean. The defeat of the terrorists, this is their own defeat because these are their real army on the ground. They didn't interfere in Syria or intervened directly. They have intervened through those proxies. So that's how we have to look at it if we want to be realistic, regardless of their statements, of course.
Palmyra is in another troubled region now, and it's now taken by ISIS or
yeah.
ISIL. But we don't hear a lot of condemnation about it. Is that because of the same reason?
Exactly, because if it was captured by the government, they will be worried about the heritage. Mm-hmm. If we liberate Aleppo from the terrorists, there would be, I mean, the Western officials and the mainstream media, they're going to be worried about the civilians. They're not worried when the opposite happens, when the terrorists killing those civilians or attacking Palmyra and started destroying the human heritage, not only the Syrian heritage. Exactly, you are right, because ISIS, if you look at the timing of the attack, is related to what's happening in Aleppo. This is the response to what's happening in Aleppo, the advancement of the Syrian Arab army, and they wanted to make this, or let's say, to undermine the victory in Aleppo, and at the same time to distract the Syrian army from Aleppo to make it move toward Palmyra and stop the advancement. But of course, it didn't work.
How strong ISIS is today?
As strong as the support that they get from the West and the regional power. Actually, they're not strong for, if you talk about isolated case, ISIS as isolated case, they're not strong because they don't have the natural social incubator. Without it, terrorists cannot be strong enough. But the real support they have, the money, the oil field investment, the support of the American allies aircraft, that's why they are strong. So they are as strong as their supporters or as their supervisors.
Every time we come to Western Ghouta, we see the signs left by ISIS or al-Nusra, we will return. For us, it's scary because we spent a lot of money, we lost a lot of lives supporting Syria in her struggle with caliphate. So for us, it's scary that one day it can return. What's your estimation?
First of all, this is ideology. This is dark ideology was promoted for the last nearly five decades, because it started in the late 60s. It's not only in the 90s or after. Around the world, mainly by the Saudi Wahhabis. And of course, with the support of the United States and the West in general. So this is religious danger with political support. So it's both. So it's not something spontaneous. They will return, of course, because they're going to be used again and again by the Western power, but maybe under different brands. Those power was in Afghanistan 30 years ago, and Reagan called them holy fighters. He didn't call them terrorists. Now they are called terrorists, but they are using those terrorists. Maybe 10 years later, they're going to be used somewhere in this world under different brand. The same product, but they are rebranding this product. So it's a Western tool. That's why asking about feeling this tension is correct. This first. Second, you are right to feel this worry even in Russia, not because you lost life in Syria, because you have the same terrorism in Russia. How I look at it, if those terrorists succeeded in Russia, I will be in danger. They're going to come to Syria and to other countries, and vice versa. So you've been defending the Syrian, but you've been defending the Russians. So you paid the price in Syria in defending the Syrian, but you are defending the Russians as well, because terrorism has no political borders. For them, it's one battlefield from Russia to Syria, maybe to Indonesia, and maybe to Morocco on the Atlantic oceans.
I feel that you call them terrorists, but
Yeah.
at the same time you treat them as human beings. You tell them you have a chance to go back to your normal life.
Exactly. They are terrorists because they are holding machine gun, they kill, they destroy, they commit vandalism, and so on. And that's natural everywhere in the world. That's called as terrorism. But at the same time, they are a human who are committed terrorism. They could be something else. They joined the terrorists for different reasons, either out of fear, for the money, sometimes for the ideology. So if you can bring them back to their normal life, to be natural citizens, that's your job there as a government. It's not enough to say we're going to fight terrorists. Fighting terrorists is like a video game. You can destroy your enemy in the video game, but the video game will generate and regenerate thousands of enemies. So you cannot deal with it on the American way, just killing, just killing. This is not our goal. This is the last option you have. If you can change, this is a good option. And it succeeded. It succeeded because many of those terrorists, when they changed their position, some of them living normal life, and some of them joined the Syrian army. They fought with the Syrian army against the other terrorists. This is success from our point of view.
When I came to Eastern Ghouta, I met the people who could prove by themselves that they've seen how al-Nusra showed the chemical weapon to their areas. I've seen all these chemical suits in rooms where were the headquarters of al-Nusra, and so on. But West tells that you poison your own people with a chemical weapon. Why is that?
Yeah.
Why nobody is listening to the people, and why West is so insistent in that?
Because the chemical narrative is part of their main narrative against the government in Syria. But they use it only when their troops, their proxies, the terrorists, been defeated in Syria in certain areas. They use this story or this narrative in order to have a pretext to intervene directly, militarily, and to attack the Syrian army. That's what happened many times. And every time they use this story, it's only when their proxies, the terrorists, been defeated. It should be, I mean, logically, let alone the reality that we don't have any chemical weapons anyway. We give
You
them
don't
up.
have at all.
We don't have, no. Since 2013, we don't have. But put this aside, even if you have it, you should be using those weapons at least if you are being defeated, not when you win the war. And actually, every time we are winning, they use it. So this is, again, the logic. But this is used as pretext in order to support the terrorists in Syria.
Let's talk about media's role in this conflict.
Yeah.
All sides during this war have been accused of civilian casualties, but the Western media has been almost completely silent about the atrocities committed by the rebels. What role is the media playing here?
First of all, the mainstream media, with their fellows politicians, they are suffering during the last few decades from moral decay. So they have no morals. Whatever they talk about, whatever they mention or they use as mask, human rights, civilians, children, they use all these just for their own political agenda in order to provoke the feelings of their public opinion to support them in their intervention in this region, whether military or political. So they don't have any credibility regarding that. If we want to look at what's happening in the United States is a rebellion against the mainstream media, because they've been lying and they kept lying on their audiences. We can tell that the public opinion or the people in the West doesn't know the real story in our region, but at least they know that the mainstream media and their politicians were lying to them for their own vested interest agenda and vested interest politicians. That's why I don't think the mainstream media could sell their stories anymore, and that's why they are fighting for their existence in the West, although they have a huge experience and a huge support and money and resources, but they don't have something very important for them to survive, which is the credibility. They don't have it, they lost it. They don't have the transparency. That's why they don't have credibility. That's why they are very coward today. They are afraid from your channel, from any statement that could tell the truth, because it's going to debunk their cause. That's why.
One of the main players is the United States. And Trump made his meeting in Singapore with Kim. Recently, Iran told that we will never meet with Trump because Kim is not Muslim. He doesn't understand what's going on. We'll never talk to Trump ever. Will you, if it will be necessary, meet Trump directly or indirectly? Do you think that it's necessary for you to talk to Trump?
We believe that discussing or talking or negotiating with your adversary, and any other one, of course, is productive. But in this case, it's always, since we had the first negotiation with the United States in 1974, we never achieved anything in any subject. The problem with the American president that they are hostages to their lobbies, to the mainstream media, to the huge corporations, financial, oil, armaments, etc. So they can tell you whatever you want to hear, but they will do the opposite. And this is the case, and it's getting worse and worse, and Trump is a very stark example. So talking and discussing with the American now for no reason, without achieving anything, it's just a waste of time. We're not happy to talk with the Americans just because they are American. We are ready to discuss with anyone who could be productive, and we don't believe that the American politics will be different in the foreseeable future. So it's just, again, waste of time now.
We hear Western powers asking Russia and Iran repeatedly to put pressure on you to, as they put it, stop the violence. And just recently, 6 Western nations, in an unprecedented message, they asked Russia and Iran again to put pressure on you, asking for a ceasefire in Aleppo.
Yeah.
Will you go for it? At the time when your army was progressing, they were asking for a ceasefire.
It's always important in politics to read between the lines, not to be literal. Doesn't matter what they ask. The translation of their statement is for Russia, please stop the advancement of the Syrian army against the terrorists. That's the meaning of that statement. Forget about the rest. You went too far in defeating the terrorists. That shouldn't happen. You should tell the Syrians to stop this. We have to keep the terrorists and to save them. This is in brief. Second, Russia never, these days, I mean, during this war, before that war, during the Soviet Union, never tried to interfere in our decision till that moment. Whenever they had opinion or advice, doesn't matter how we can look at it, they say at the end, this is your country, you know what the best decision you want to take. This is how we see it, but if you see it in a different way, you know, you are the Syrian. They are realistic, and they respect our sovereignty, and they always defend the sovereignty that's based on the international law and the Charter of the United Nations. So it never happened that they made any pressure, and they will never do it. This is not their methodology. And the United States wanted to redraw the map of the world politically and maybe militarily. So Syria was one of the main battlefields to redraw this map, at least in the Middle East. That's why when you talk about those interests, this is a fight between these powers. The main power, United States and their allies, supporting the terrorists, and the goal is to have hegemony. And the other power is Russia with its allies. Their aim is to fight the terrorism and to restore the international law.
But why Syria was selected for this game?
For many different reasons. Syria is part of the group of countries that they are considered as independent. Syria, Iran, North Korea, and now Russia as an independent country. So the West doesn't accept any independent position. America doesn't accept any European independent position. And that's why you have problem in Russia with US, because you want it to be independent, and they don't accept you. Even if you're a great power or not, you cannot be independent. This is one reason. And we are a small country. How can we say no and yes? We have to say only yes. This is one reason. Second, geopolitics of Syria, the historic role of the Syrian society, although it's very small, but this is fault line, social fault line between the different sexes and ethnicities. And when you control this area, you could have controlled the rest of the Middle East. That's why the struggle on Syria started during the Pharaohs. And the first treaty in the world was 12 centuries before Christ, was between the Pharaoh and Hittites, coming from north and south. They fought regarding on Syria, and they signed the first treaty in history. So the geopolitics of Syria is very important. So controlling Syria was a goal to the great powers since that time till this moment. So it doesn't matter whether Syria is big or small, or bigger or smaller. It's important.
Humanitarian situation in Syria is disaster. And we hear from EU Foreign Policy Chief, Madame Mogherini, that EU is the only entity to deliver humanitarian aid to Syria. Is that true?
Actually, all the aid that any Western country sent was to the terrorists. To be very clear and very blunt and very transparent, they never cared about single Syrian human life. We have so many cities in Syria till today surrounded by and besieged by the terrorists. They prevented anything to reach them, food, water, anything, all the basic needs of life. Of course, they attack them on a daily basis by mortars and try to kill them. What did the EU send to those if they are worried about the human life? If they talk about the humanitarian aspect, because when you talk about humanitarian aspect or issue, you don't discriminate. All the Syrians are humans. All the people are humans. They don't do that. So this is the double standard. This is the lie that they keep telling, and it's becoming disgusting lie. No one is selling their stories anymore. That's not true. What she mentioned, not true. Yeah.
What do you expect from Russia in this case? Because we are allies, we are friends, and
friendship is long-term issue between Syria and Russia for 6 decades. But we signed the treaty. The military treaty is for more than 4 decades. So we have 2 reasons. The first one, Syria and Russia have interest in fighting and defeating terrorism in Syria and Russia, anywhere in the world. So this is the first expectation and goal. The second one is the long-term one. Russia is very important for the global balance that we've lost in the collapse of the Soviet Union. So having Russia being here militarily and politically in Syria and in the Middle East and in the rest of the world, very important for the balance. It's not only important for Russia itself and for the other great powers, it's very important for smaller countries like Syria to have this balance. So that's what we expect from Russia on both levels, fighting terrorism and having a global balance. Russia is fighting for the international law. And part of this international law, the sovereignty of different countries, of the sovereign countries. Syria is one of them. Their politics, their behavior, their values is not about interfere or dictate. They don't. We've had good relations with Russia for more than 6 decades now, nearly 7 decades. They never, during our relation, try to dictate, even if there's differences.